So this would probably be a long video because we had a lot of ground to cover. What I want to do is bring you guys up to speed on everything that's going on with the project over here, and talk about some of the different, some of the obstacles that we've got to overcome. Not really obstacles, but little things that need to be taken into account for when going from the 360, from the 318 to the 360. So, and then also show you what we're doing with the engine itself, pistons, the intake manifold. We finally got our hands on that, and the heads. But let's start with swapping a neutral balance motor like a 273, 318, early 340 for 360. The 360 is externally balanced. So let's go over to the ram charger here. So it has a unique damper. Everybody knows that. But it also has a weight that's added to the flywheel. So this is the later 360 weight. On the earlier motors, there's two separate weights. And on the later motors that don't have a drain plug on the torque converter, it's this one single weight. So we've got to knock this off. It's only held in place with two spot wells. We've got to knock this off, and we've got to, yeah, come this way. We've got to add it, weld it to this torque converter right here. So what we're going to do is just screw the drain plug in as far as it'll go, grind it smooth, and then weld the plug there, right? Now, how do you know exactly where it's got to go? Chrysler used, anytime they externally balance a motor, they always used this point right here, the drain plug reference point, as the mounting area for the weights. And one of the things you pay attention to when you do this is the flex plate. So all later Chrysler engines have this little hole in the flex plate, okay? And that hole mounts opposite. The hole mounts opposite the drain plug. That's saying because there's one lug that's offset. So she sits like that. So we're going to add our weight right here. And we'll position the flex plate on there so that we know that everything's going to fit together the right way. So that takes care of the balancing. Now, on the block itself, if you come here, one of the things Chrysler did on 340 and 360 blocks is it moved these two ears closer together. So here's the bracket that came off of our 318, the driver's side bracket that came off of our 318. Now, if you're using a B or an E body motor mount, all you have to do is add a spacer, approximately a quarter inch, a little bit longer than a quarter inch, between the ear and the bracket. But in this particular case, the 318 that came out of here, the early 318s, have 4 lugs instead of the 3 here on the driver's side. And in this situation, the bracket mounted like this, with this hole to an ear that doesn't exist on this block. So what we're going to do with this is just, we'll cut up another motor mount so we've got the right material, and we'll weld this tab on here so that we've got our 3 connection points on the driver's side. So that's it for that. Now, as far as the block itself goes, the block turns out to be in beautiful shape, in spite of its external appearances. There's traces of crosshatch top to bottom on every cylinder. So we know that the bores are still round, and we'll be able to hone this and just get a fresh surface for our rings to reseat on. Contrary to the observations of a few complete fucking idiots in the comments of the last video, this engine has no signs of ever being overheated. So she's actually in really good shape. And all she needs is just to clean up and a hone. Now, our pistons. We have 2 pistons that have stuck rings. So ironically enough, this is the piston that was stuck in the engine. And you can see it's got marks on it from when we hit it out. And the rings on this one are fine. They're free. Contrary to a bunch of complete fucking idiots on the video that we did on that saying, oh, you're going to destroy the piston. No, the piston's fine, the rings are fine. We had 2 pistons that have stuck rings. So let me show you how we free these things up. This is something I've done dozens of times, probably 100 times over the years. If you're building on a budget, you need to know this stuff. So this is one of the two that had stuck rings. So what I do is I chuck them up on a vise like this, and I take a propane torch. Don't use oxyacetylene, for kind of obvious reasons. Don't use MAP gas. It's too hot. What you want to do is you want to take a propane torch like this and position it. Before you do that, you want to soak the piston down, soak the rings down with a relatively non-flammable penetrating fluid, like PB, plaster, and stick your torch up in here and just let this thing sit and cook. Right? Position it in such a way so it's not going to fall over. This one looks okay. And just let this thing sit and cook. And I mean literally, just pretend it's not even there. Walk away from it for 15-20 minutes. It's not going to overheat the piston. There isn't enough temperature there to overheat the piston. It's really only seeing about what it would see temperature-wise in a running engine. But what's going to happen now is the aluminum is going to expand and want to release the rings. After about 15 minutes or so of heat, we'll just fast forward for demonstration purposes. Okay, see, it's just starting to get warm now. It's starting to. Just keep giving these things a nice, healthy squirt. Let it percolate. Once you get to the point that this thing is like smoking, we've already done this. This one's already half free. I stopped so I could show you guys, what we do for the other side. This side is already free right here. Once the piston is up to temperature, you take your torch out, and you take a pick, a small screwdriver, a pick, and you just poke it into the ring gap. You need to know where your ring gap is, and just gently push it out. Now you can see these things are free on that side. So now if I go to this side, I should be able to just, we're gonna have to do a little more heating on this. Here we go. And the ring is free. Once you've got the ring out of there, if you're gonna reuse the ring, which, I mean, if you check them and the rings look good, cylinder walls aren't all scuffed up, the ring still has a nice surface, and you can ascertain that it hasn't been worn thinner, right? You can usually reuse them. Just hit the ring with Scotch-Brite, get off all of this rust. See here, you could see where the moisture got in there and just created a rusty situation, and that's what stuck the ring to it, right? So that's how you free a piston, or free the rings on the piston. We've got one other to do there, and this thing will be fine. Whether or not the rings, I've got to measure the rings to see if I'm going to bother reusing them, but you save $100, you save $100. Okay, now to the fun stuff. So we talked about the SP2P manifold, and here we have it in our hands. This thing is such a travesty among performance intake manifolds. It's unlike anything else you're going to come across. You could see the tiny runners here, and they made them. You see, they've actually got some pretty crazy curves to them, and that was in the name of making the runner as long as possible. And here, you can see where the magic happens. The carbon outline there is a stock 318 port, which is already small to begin with. And that carbon outline right there, it shows you the difference between the stock 318 port and the SP2P port. Now, one of the benefits of this, I know right away, is like, oh, it's a port mismatch. Yeah, but it's a port mismatch going the right way. You can see this carbon, these carbon witness marks around the outside of it are actually showing you that this thing is stopping reversion, or in other words, at some points during the cycle, the intake gases are going to want to going to want to go back up into the intake manifold. You want the sonic pulse to go up the intake manifold. This won't disturb that, but the gases, this will actually stop the gases from going up inside of it. So we're not going to touch this at all. This is exactly how the manifold was designed to be used, and this is how we're going to throw it on the engine. It's going to be a torque freak, no matter how you look at it. This thing is going to make stupid power in the 2,000 to 3,000 RPM range. 5,000 RPM, nobody home. Forget about it. She's not going to go there. But we don't want it to go there. This is our daily driver. We want this thing to be right on, around town. We want it to be right, back roads. We want it to be right on the interstate. And this is the setup that's going to do it. And these are the heads we're using. These are just regular 318 heads. I mean, there's absolutely nothing remarkable about them at all. At some point, somebody put a set of 340 valve springs on there. We'll be taking those off and putting a set of standard springs on there, giving it a quick hand valve job. I don't think we're going to do anything to these ports at all other than just break the sharp edges on the exhaust. And you can see the combustion chambers on these things. They're a few cc smaller than the stock 360 chamber. Actually, you can see here's a witness mark. These were on a 360 at some point, and you can see that the witness mark from the larger 360 bore on the 318 cylinder head. So we're just going to run through here, and we're just going to break the sharp edges so that we don't give detonation any place a chance to set hold. Clean these heads up, give them a quickie hand valve job, and then there's one other thing that we have to do. When you're going from, there's Mopar specific, when you're going from a non-roller cylinder head like this to one that has a roller cam, the angle of the push rod changes. So what's happening here, because the lifter sticks up higher, it actually has to come out even further or lay closer to the center of the bore than it would without, or with the shorter normal lifter, a flat tappet lifter. So if you look at this is a roller. This is a roller cylinder head. This is the original ones off of this engine, and you can see the size of the push rod tubes. So if we were to take these heads and just bolt them on that engine with the roller cam, the push rods would bind in the same holes right here. So what we've got to do is we have to enlarge these holes. We're not going to go crazy enlarging them. We're not going to bring them all the way to this size, because then you get into thin areas between the water jacket here and the intake port here. But what we're going to do is we're going to enlarge them just a little bit, and then we're going to oblong them. And we're going to oblong them so that the push rod has a clear shot. It's a trial and error thing. We have to mock the engine together with the cam and a lifter and a push rod and put it through its cycle a couple of times so that we know exactly how far we're going to have to go with that. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover this time. The pistons, the heads, the block, the fucking idiots in the comments. Yeah, that's it. So the work continues. I have probably 125 hours worth of cleaning, massaging, assembling, and all of that stuff ahead of me. So I'm going to get back to that, and in the meantime, I'll see you guys tomorrow.